The dust storm had been raging for 3 days when Marcus finally reached the edge of the Navajo reservation. His horse stumbled beneath him, exhausted from the relentless journey across the harsh desert landscape. Marcus himself looked like a man possessed, his clothes torn and dirty, his face gaunt from lack of sleep and proper food. But nothing could stop him now. His daughter Emma was dying, and he had nowhere else to turn. Marcus had once been a proud man, working as a servant in the grand mansion of Colonel Harrison in Santa Fe. The job paid well enough to support his young daughter after his wife died in childbirth. Emma was everything to him, a bright, cheerful 8-year-old with golden hair and eyes that sparkled with curiosity about the world around her. She'd love to draw pictures of horses and ask endless questions about the stars in the sky. 3 weeks ago, Emma had fallen ill with a fever that no doctor could cure. She grew weaker each day, her skin turning pale as parchment, her breathing becoming shallow and labored. The town doctor tried everything he knew, but nothing worked. Colonel Harrison had even brought in specialists from as far as Denver, but they all shook their heads in defeat. The sickness was unlike anything they had seen before. In desperation, Marcus had sought advice from anyone who would listen. An old Mexican woman in the market had whispered about the Navajo healers, speaking of their ancient knowledge and powerful medicine. She told him that deep in the reservation lived a medicine man named Joseph B. Gay, known among his people as someone who could cure illnesses that baffled white doctors. Colonel Harrison had forbidden Marcus from leaving his duties, especially to seek help from savage Indians, as he called them. But Marcus no longer cared about his job or his master's approval. When Emma's condition worsened and she could barely open her eyes, Marcus made his choice. He stole one of the colonel's horses in the dead of night and rode toward the reservation, carrying what little money he had saved over the years. The journey had been brutal. The desert sun beat down mercilessly during the day, while the nights were so cold that Marcus could see his breath in the moonlight. He had gotten lost twice following old trails that led nowhere. His water ran low and he was forced to drink from muddy creek beds. But thoughts of Emma kept him going. He remembered her laugh, the way she would run to greet him when he returned from work, how she would curl up beside him while he read her bedtime stories. Now, as he crested a small hill, Marcus could see smoke rising from cooking fires in the distance. A cluster of traditional hogans and newer wooden houses marked the heart of the Navajo community. His heart pounded with a mixture of hope and fear. These people had no reason to help him. He was a white man, a stranger from a world that had brought nothing but trouble to their people. But he had to try. As Marcus rode into the settlement, curious eyes followed his progress. Children stopped their games to stare at the dusty, desperate-looking man on the tired horse. Women paused in their daily tasks, whispering to each other in their native language. Men watched him with careful, guarded expressions. Marcus dismounted near what appeared to be the largest dwelling, his legs shaking from exhaustion. An elderly Navajo woman emerged from the house, her long gray hair braided with turquoise beads. She studied him with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through to his soul. "I need to find Joseph Begay," Marcus said, his voice hoarse from thirst and desperation. "My daughter is dying. Please, I'll do anything. I'll pay whatever you ask." The woman tilted her head, considering his words. She spoke in Navajo to a young man who had appeared beside her, and he nodded before disappearing back into the house. Other villagers began to gather around, their faces showing mixtures of curiosity, suspicion, and something that might have been sympathy. "You are far from your world, white man," the elderly woman said in careful English. "What makes you think our medicine can help when yours has failed?" Marcus fell to his knees in the dust, not caring how it looked or what these people might think of him. "Because I have faith," he said, tears streaming down his face. "Faith that there are powers in this world beyond what I understand. My little girl is all I have left. If she dies, I die with her. Please, just let me speak to your medicine man." The crowd murmured among themselves, some shaking their heads, others looking moved by his obvious desperation. The elderly woman studied him for a long moment, then spoke again in Navajo. A heated discussion followed, with various members of the community voicing their opinions. Finally, the young man returned and whispered something to the elderly woman. She nodded slowly, then looked back at Marcus with something resembling pity in her eyes. "Joseph Begay will see you," she said. "But know this, desperate father. Our medicine comes with a price that white men often find too high to pay. Are you prepared for whatever he might ask of you? Marcus looked up at her, hope flickering in his exhausted eyes like a candle flame in the wind. I'll pay any price, he whispered. Just save my daughter. The woman nodded and gestured for him to follow. As they walked toward a hogan set apart from the others, Marcus felt the weight of many eyes upon him. He knew that his presence here would not be welcome by all, that some of these people had suffered greatly at the hands of white settlers and soldiers. But desperation had brought him beyond such considerations. All that mattered now was Emma, lying in her bed back in Santa Fe, growing weaker with each passing hour. The sun was beginning to set, painting the desert sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. Somewhere in the distance a coyote howled, its lonely cry echoing across the vast landscape. Marcus shivered, knowing that he was about to enter a world completely different from his own, where the rules he understood no longer applied. But if there was even the smallest chance that these people could save Emma, he would face whatever lay ahead. The elderly woman, who introduced herself as Maria Begay, led Marcus to a traditional hogan made of logs and earth. The circular dwelling seemed to emerge from the desert itself, its doorway facing east toward the rising sun. As they approached, Marcus could smell the sharp scent of burning sage and other herbs he couldn't identify. Wait here, Maria instructed, gesturing to a flat rock near the entrance. Joseph will decide if you are worthy of his help. Marcus sat on the rock, his body aching from the long journey. Around him, the Navajo community continued its evening routines. Children were called in for supper, livestock was gathered for the night, and the cooking fires began to glow brighter as darkness approached. Despite his desperate situation, Marcus found himself fascinated by the peaceful rhythm of life here, so different from the bustling mansion where he worked. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, the hogan's blanket door was pushed aside. A man emerged who was nothing like what Marcus had expected. Joseph Begay was perhaps 40 years old, with graying hair pulled back in a traditional style and kind eyes that held depths of wisdom. He wore simple clothing, jeans and a cotton shirt, but around his neck hung intricate silver and turquoise jewelry that caught the firelight. "You have traveled far to find me," Joseph said, his English clear and unaccented. "Tell me about your daughter." Marcus stood quickly, his heart racing with hope. "Her name is Emma. She's 8 years old and she's been sick for 3 weeks. The fever won't break and she's getting weaker every day. The doctors don't know what's wrong with her. They say there's nothing more they can do." Joseph studied Marcus carefully, his eyes seeming to look not just at him, but into him. "Describe her illness exactly. Leave out nothing." Marcus took a deep breath and began to recount every detail of Emma's condition. He described how the fever had started suddenly one morning, how she complained of terrible headaches that made her cry, how she had begun to see things that weren't there, shadows moving in the corners of her room, voices calling her name when no one was around. As the days passed, she had grown increasingly disconnected from reality, sometimes not recognizing Marcus at all. "The strangest thing," Marcus continued, his voice breaking, "is that sometimes she speaks in a language I've never heard before, not Spanish or French or any European language. It sounds almost like the wind through the canyon walls, and her eyes. Sometimes they look completely black, as if something else is looking out through them." Joseph's expression grew serious as he listened. When Marcus finished, the medicine man was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the darkening desert. "Your daughter is not sick with any disease that white medicine can cure," Joseph finally said. "She has been touched by something from the spirit world, something that should not be in the world of the living." Marcus felt his blood turn cold. "What do you mean? What kind of spirit?" "There are things in this world that your people do not understand or acknowledge," Joseph explained. "Spirits that can attach themselves to children, especially those who are sensitive to the unseen world. Your daughter may have encountered something during her play, or perhaps she inherited the gift of seeing beyond the physical world. Such children are vulnerable to beings that feed on life force." "Can you help her?" Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. Joseph was quiet again, considering. "I can try, but the ceremony required is dangerous and difficult. It will take several days and there are no guarantees. The spirit that has attached itself to your daughter may fight to keep her. And there is another problem." "What problem?" "I'll do anything. The ceremony cannot be performed here. It must be done in the place where the spirit first touched her." I would have to come with you to Santa Fe to your daughter's bedside. This creates many risks for my people and for myself. Marcus understood immediately. A Navajo medicine man traveling to a white settlement would face suspicion, hostility, and possibly violence. Many white people still viewed Native Americans as dangerous savages, especially when they practiced their traditional beliefs. I'll protect you, Marcus promised. I'll find a way to bring you to Emma safely. Joseph shook his head. You cannot promise such things. You are a servant, not a man of power in your world. But there is something else you must understand. If I agree to help your daughter, you will owe a debt that cannot be paid with money. What kind of debt? The spirits demand balance. If I save a life, another life must be offered in service. Not death, Joseph clarified quickly, seeing Marcus's alarmed expression. But service. You would be bound to help my people when we have need, regardless of the cost to yourself. This might mean opposing your own kind, losing your job, or facing dangers you cannot imagine. Are you prepared for such a commitment? Marcus thought of Emma lying in her bed, her small body burning with fever, her eyes sometimes looking at him without recognition. He thought of her laughter, now silenced, and her drawings scattered around her room like memories of happier times. Yes, he said without hesitation. I accept whatever debt you require. Joseph nodded slowly. Very well. But first, you must prove that your commitment is real. Tonight you will undergo a test. You will spend the night alone in the desert, in a place where the spirits are strong. If you survive until dawn and still wish to proceed, I will come with you to save your daughter. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of test? You will go to the place we call Ghost Canyon, about 2 miles north of here. It is a sacred site where the boundary between worlds is thin. The spirits there will test your resolve, your courage, and your love for your daughter. Some men who enter that place never return. Others come back changed forever. But if you pass the test, you will have proven that you are worthy of the risk I'm about to take. When do I go? Now, before your courage fails you. Joseph pointed to the north, where the dark outline of mesas rose against the star-filled sky. Follow the trail marked with white stones. When you reach the canyon, find the circle of standing stones and wait there until sunrise. Do not leave the circle no matter what you see or hear. Do not speak to anything that is not clearly human. And remember, the spirits will try to break your will by showing you your deepest fears and greatest regrets. Marcus stood, his legs still shaky from exhaustion, but his resolve firm. And if I pass this test, you'll come with me to Emma? If you pass the test and still want my help when the sun rises, I will gather my medicine bundles and ride with you to face whatever spirit has claimed your daughter. But know this, the journey ahead will test us both in ways you cannot imagine. As Marcus walked toward his horse, Maria Big A emerged from the shadows. Take this, she said, pressing a small leather pouch into his hand. It contains sacred corn pollen. If the spirits become too strong, scatter some in a circle around yourself and pray to whatever god you believe in. Marcus nodded his thanks and mounted his horse. As he rode north toward Ghost Canyon, he could feel the eyes of the entire village watching his departure. Behind him, cooking fires flickered like earthbound stars, while ahead lay only darkness and the unknown challenges that awaited him in a place where the spirit world touched the realm of the living. The first rays of sunlight painted the canyon walls in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Marcus slowly stood up from the stone circle, his body stiff and aching from sitting motionless for hours. The canyon looked completely different in the daylight, peaceful and beautiful, with no trace of the supernatural horrors that had tormented him through the night. Only the memory of those dark hours proved they had been real. Marcus retrieved his horse, which had somehow remained calm throughout the night's events, and began the journey back to the Navajo settlement. His mind felt clearer than it had in weeks, as if the spiritual ordeal had burned away all his doubts and fears, leaving only pure determination to save his daughter. When he reached the village, Joseph Begay was already waiting for him, sitting beside a packed travel bag and what appeared to be a collection of ceremonial items wrapped in colorful cloth. The medicine man studied Marcus's face carefully, then nodded with satisfaction. You have passed the test, Joseph said simply. I can see it in your eyes. The spirits have found you worthy, and so you will have my help. But we must leave immediately. Every hour that passes makes the spirits hold on your daughter stronger. Within an hour, the two men were riding east toward Santa Fe. Joseph had packed his medicine bundles, sacred items needed for the healing ceremony, and enough supplies for several days. Maria Begay had insisted on providing food for their journey and had given Marcus a beautiful silver bracelet that she said would protect him from further spiritual attacks. As they rode, Joseph explained more about what they would face. The spirit that has attached itself to your daughter is what we call a hunger ghost, the soul of someone who died with great needs unfulfilled. These beings exist in a state of constant craving and will drain the life force from the living to try to satisfy their endless appetite. How did this thing find Emma? Marcus asked, his anger rising at the thought of something deliberately harming his innocent daughter. Children who are sensitive to the spirit world often attract such beings without meaning to, Joseph explained. Your daughter may have the gift of seeing beyond the physical realm. This is a blessing in our culture, but it can be dangerous without proper training and protection. The hunger ghost sensed her ability and began feeding on her life energy. The journey to Santa Fe would normally take 2 days, but Marcus pushed the pace, driven by desperation and fear for Emma's condition. They rode long into the night, stopping only to rest the horses and catch a few hours of sleep before dawn. Joseph seemed as tireless as Marcus, understanding the urgency of their mission. On the second day, as they crested a hill overlooking the Santa Fe Valley, Joseph suddenly pulled his horse to a halt. His face was grim as he stared toward the distant town. Something is wrong, he said quietly. I can feel the spirit's presence from here. It has grown much stronger since you left. Your daughter may not have much time remaining. Marcus spurred his horse forward, panic rising in his chest. They galloped down into the valley and through the outskirts of Santa Fe as the sun began to set. The familiar sights of the town, the adobe buildings, the busy market square, the grand mansions of the wealthy, all seemed strange and foreign to Marcus now, as if his journey into the Navajo world had changed his perspective on everything. As they approached Colonel Harrison's mansion, Marcus felt his stomach tighten with anxiety. Not only was he returning after stealing the colonel's horse and abandoning his duties, but he was bringing a Navajo medicine man to perform what the colonel would certainly consider pagan rituals in his own house. The mansion's grounds were unusually quiet. No servants moved about their evening duties, and many of the windows were dark. Marcus dismounted at the servants' entrance and gestured for Joseph to follow him. They tied their horses to a fence post and approached the building cautiously. Marcus's friend Tom, another servant who worked in the stables, emerged from the shadows near the kitchen door. His face was pale with exhaustion and worry. Marcus, thank God you're back, Tom whispered urgently. Emma's gotten much worse. She hasn't opened her eyes in 2 days, and her breathing is so shallow that Mrs. Henderson says she might not last through the night. The colonel has been raging about your disappearance, but when Emma got worse, he seemed to forget about everything except finding someone who could help her. This is Joseph Begay, Marcus said, indicating the Navajo medicine man. He's here to heal Emma. Tom's eyes widened as he looked at Joseph with a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. An Indian. Marcus, are you sure about this? If the colonel finds out, the colonel's doctors have failed, Marcus said firmly. This man is Emma's only hope. Where is she now? In her room in the servants' quarters. Mrs. Henderson has been sitting with her, but there's nothing more she can do. The doctor said to make her comfortable and wait for the end. Marcus felt his heart clench at those words. He led Joseph through the familiar corridors of the mansion toward the servants' quarters. Along the way, they passed several other servants who stared at Joseph with open amazement. Word of the Indian medicine man's presence would spread quickly through the household. Emma's room was small but comfortable, with a window that looked out onto the mansion's garden. Mrs. Henderson, the head housekeeper, sat beside the bed where Emma lay motionless. The 8-year-old girl looked frighteningly thin and pale, her breathing so shallow that Marcus had to look closely to see her chest rising and falling. Mrs. Henderson looked up as they entered, her eyes immediately fixing on Joseph with suspicion and fear. Marcus, what is the meaning of this? Who is this man? He's here to help Emma, Marcus said gently. Please, Mrs. Henderson, I know how this looks, but our doctors have failed. Let him try to save her. Joseph approached the bed slowly, his eyes never leaving Emma's still form. As he drew closer, he suddenly stopped and took a sharp breath. The spirit is very strong here, he said quietly. It has almost completely drained her life force. We have very little time. What do you need? Marcus asked. First, everyone except you must leave the room. The ceremony requires privacy and concentration. Then I will need water from a natural spring, sage for burning, and complete silence from the rest of the house." Mrs. Henderson looked scandalized. "I will not leave this child alone with a heathen savage. This is madness, Marcus." "Please," Marcus pleaded, taking her hands in his. "You've known me for 5 years. You know I would never do anything to harm Emma. This man is our last hope." Something in Marcus's desperate expression must have convinced her. Mrs. Henderson looked once more at Emma's deathly pale face, then nodded reluctantly. "Very well. But if any harm comes to this child, I'll hold you responsible." After Mrs. Henderson left, Joseph began unpacking his medicine bundles. He arranged various items around the room: eagle feathers, small stones, pouches of herbs, and a beautifully carved wooden flute. From his travel bag, he produced several painted wooden sticks and what appeared to be colored sand in small containers. "The ceremony will take most of the night," Joseph explained as he worked. "The hunger ghost will fight to keep its hold on your daughter. You must be prepared to see things that will frighten you, but you cannot interfere no matter what happens. Your daughter's life depends on your remaining calm and trusting in the ancient ways." As Joseph began to create an intricate sand painting on the floor around Emma's bed, Marcus settled into a chair to watch and wait. Outside the window, full darkness had fallen, and he could hear the normal sounds of the mansion settling in for the night. But inside this small room, they were preparing for a battle that would determine whether Emma lived or died, a confrontation between the spiritual traditions of two very different worlds. Joseph lit a bundle of sage and began to chant in his native language, his voice low and rhythmic. The smoke from the burning herbs filled the room with a sharp, clean scent that seemed to push back the oppressive feeling that had hung over Emma for weeks. For the first time since he had left for the reservation, Marcus allowed himself to hope that his daughter might actually survive the night. Joseph's chanting filled the small room with an otherworldly rhythm that seemed to pulse with the beating of Marcus's heart. The medicine man had completed an elaborate sand painting around Emma's bed, using colored sands to create intricate patterns that depicted eagles, bears, and other sacred symbols. Feathers hung from the 4 corners of the room, and the smoke from burning sage created shifting shadows on the walls. As the ceremony deepened, the temperature in the room began to drop noticeably. Marcus could see his breath in the candlelight, and frost began to form on the windows despite the warm autumn evening outside. Emma's breathing became even more labored, and her skin took on an alarming blue tinge. "It knows we are here," Joseph said quietly, never pausing in his chanting. "The hunger ghost can sense the threat to its hold on your daughter. It will try to stop us." Suddenly Emma's eyes snapped open, but they were completely black, as if something dark and alien was looking out through them. Her back arched off the bed in an impossible position, and she began to speak in a voice that was not her own, deep, raspy, and filled with malevolent intelligence. "You cannot have her," the voice hissed. "She is mine now. Her life force feeds me, sustains me. I have tasted her dreams and drunk her memories. She will not leave me." Marcus started to rise from his chair, every instinct screaming at him to go to his daughter, but Joseph held up a hand without looking away from Emma. "Do not respond to it," Joseph warned. "That is not your daughter speaking. The spirit is trying to provoke you into interfering with the ceremony." The thing speaking through Emma laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Yes, listen to the medicine man, little servant. Watch as I consume the last of her strength. See how helpless you truly are." Emma's body began to convulse violently, her limbs jerking as if she were fighting against invisible restraints. The black eyes rolled back, showing only white, and foam appeared at the corners of her mouth. Marcus gripped the arms of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white, tears streaming down his face as he watched his daughter's torment. Joseph raised his voice, the chanting becoming more urgent and forceful. He picked up his wooden flute and began to play a haunting melody that seemed to cut through the spirit's influence. The black eyes snapped back to focus on him with pure hatred. "You think your old songs can drive me away?" the voice snarled. "I have fed on this child for weeks. Her essence has become part of me. She remembers nothing of her life before I came. She is an empty shell, and I am all that remains." But Joseph continued playing, and gradually the convulsions began to subside. Emma's body relaxed slightly, though her eyes remained black and fixed on the medicine man with murderous intent. The spirit tried a different approach. Suddenly, Emma's voice returned to normal, sweet, frightened, and utterly convincing. "Daddy, Daddy, why are you letting this man hurt me? Make him stop, please. I'm scared, Daddy." Marcus's heart broke at the sound of his daughter's terrified voice. Every fiber of his being wanted to rush to her side and drive Joseph away from her bed. But he had learned in the desert canyon to distinguish between reality and spiritual deception. This was another test of his resolve. "That's not Emma," he said firmly, though his voice shook with emotion. "Emma wouldn't ask me to stop someone who's trying to save her." The false Emma voice screamed in rage and frustration. The black eyes returned and the deep, inhuman voice resumed its threats. "Very well. If I cannot keep the child, then I will take someone else. The medicine man looks strong and healthy. His life force will sustain me for years." Joseph continued his ceremony, but Marcus could see sweat beading on the medicine man's forehead despite the cold in the room. The effort of fighting the spirit was clearly taking its toll. The candles began to flicker wildly, and several went out completely, plunging parts of the room into dancing shadows. "You're weakening, old man," the spirit taunted. "Your power is nothing compared to mine. I have existed for centuries, feeding on the living, growing stronger with each life I consume. What are you compared to that?" In response, Joseph set down his flute and picked up one of the painted wooden sticks. He began to trace symbols in the air above Emma's body, speaking in rapid Navajo that seemed to crackle with spiritual energy. The symbols appeared to glow faintly in the dim light, hanging in the air for a moment before fading. The spirit reacted as if Joseph had struck it physically. Emma's body jerked backward and the black eyes widened with what looked like genuine fear for the first time. "No," the voice whispered. "Those words, those symbols, they should not have such power in this place. This child is under the protection of the holy people," Joseph declared, his voice ringing with authority. "You have no claim on her. Her father's love has opened the way for healing, and his sacrifice has earned the right to call upon powers greater than yours." The spirit shrieked in rage, and every window in the room shattered simultaneously. Glass fragments hung in the air for a moment, then fell harmlessly to the floor without cutting anyone. The sand painting around Emma's bed began to glow with its own inner light, and the shadows on the walls seemed to recoil from its brightness. "I will not be banished," the spirit roared. "If I cannot have the child, I will destroy her rather than lose my prize." Emma's body began to convulse again, more violently than before. Her breathing stopped entirely and her heart rate spiked to dangerous levels. Marcus could see that she was dying, that the spirit was trying to kill her rather than give her up. Joseph dropped the wooden stick and placed his hands directly on Emma's forehead. The moment his skin touched hers, both of them were surrounded by crackling energy that lit up the entire room. Joseph cried out in pain, but he didn't remove his hands. "I call upon the spirits of my ancestors," he chanted, his voice now echoing strangely as if other voices were speaking with him. "I call upon the power of the sacred mountains and the blessing of the holy wind. Let this child be freed from the darkness that binds her." The spirit's voice became a wail of agony. "No, she is mine! I have claimed her." "She was never yours," Joseph replied, his hands now glowing where they touched Emma's skin. "She belongs to the world of the living, to her father's love, and to the future that awaits her. Return to the place of hungry ghosts and trouble the living no more." The black eyes suddenly rolled back and Emma's body went completely limp. For a terrifying moment, Marcus thought she had died. The room fell silent except for the sound of his own ragged breathing. Then Emma drew a deep, shuddering breath. Her eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in weeks they were their natural blue color. She looked around the room in confusion, her gaze finally settling on Marcus's tear-stained face. "Daddy," she whispered in her own sweet voice. "Where have you been?" "I had the strangest dreams." Marcus burst into tears of relief and joy, finally able to leave his chair and rush to his daughter's bedside. As he gathered her into his arms, she felt warm and solid and wonderfully alive. Behind him, Joseph collapsed into a chair, exhausted but smiling. "The hunger ghost has been banished," Joseph said quietly. "Your daughter is free, but she will need time to recover her full strength. The spirit has taken much from her." Emma looked at Joseph with curiosity rather than fear. "Are you the man from my dreams? You were singing to me when everything was dark and scary." "I am Joseph," he replied gently. "And yes, I was singing to help you find your way back to your father." As dawn broke through the remaining intact windows, Marcus held his daughter close and marveled at the miracle that had saved her life. The long night of spiritual battle was over, and Emma was finally safe. But he knew that their story was far from finished, and that the debt he owed to Joseph and his people was only beginning to be understood. The morning sun streamed through the broken windows as Emma sat up in bed, color returning to her cheeks with each passing hour. She was weak and confused about the lost weeks of her illness, but her appetite had returned and she smiled when Mrs. Henderson brought her breakfast. The transformation was so complete that even the skeptical housekeeper had to admit that some kind of miracle had occurred. Colonel Harrison arrived at the servants' quarters shortly after sunrise, having heard rumors throughout the mansion about the Indian medicine man and the dramatic events of the night. He stood in the doorway of Emma's room, his face a mixture of amazement and displeasure as he took in the scene. The sand paintings, the ceremonial items, and Joseph sitting calmly beside the bed. "So," the colonel said coldly, "this is the savage you brought into my house, Marcus. I should have you both arrested for trespassing and practicing witchcraft." Marcus stood up slowly, meeting his employer's gaze with newfound confidence. "This man saved my daughter's life when your doctors had given up hope. I'll take whatever punishment you think appropriate, but I won't apologize for bringing him here." Joseph rose as well, gathering his medicine bundles with quiet dignity. "I have done what I came to do," he said to the colonel. "Your servant's daughter is healed. I ask nothing from you except safe passage from your land." "Safe passage?" Colonel Harrison laughed harshly. "You'll be lucky if I don't turn you over to the territorial authorities. The people of this territory don't take kindly to Indian medicine men practicing their heathen rituals in civilized homes." "Then you would be making a mistake," Emma said unexpectedly, her young voice carrying surprising authority. "This man saved my life. The scary things in the darkness were trying to take me away, but his songs brought me back. Anyone who hurts him would be very mean." The colonel stared at Emma in astonishment. In all the years Marcus had worked for him, the child had rarely spoken directly to her father's employer. But now she looked at the colonel with the kind of direct, honest gaze that made adults uncomfortable. "Besides," Marcus added, his voice steady despite the risk he was taking, "Joseph has friends among the territorial government. Officials who understand the value of maintaining good relations with the Navajo people. I don't think you'd want to explain to them why you mistreated a medicine man who was helping a sick child." This was a bluff. But Marcus had learned much about courage and calculated risks during his journey. The colonel studied both men for a long moment, clearly weighing the potential consequences of his actions. "Very well," he said finally. "The Indian can leave in peace, but you, Marcus, are finished here. Pack your belongings and get off my property before nightfall, and take your daughter with you." Marcus had expected this outcome, but it still hit him like a physical blow. He had no other job prospects, no savings beyond what he had already spent on the journey to the reservation, and no place to take Emma. But before he could respond, Joseph spoke up. "If I may," the medicine man said politely, "I believe there may be another solution to this situation." All eyes turned to him as he continued. "The Navajo Nation has need of a man who understands both worlds, our traditional ways and the ways of white society. We need someone who can help us navigate the complex relationship between our people and the territorial government. Someone we can trust to represent our interests honestly." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. "What are you saying?" "I'm offering you a position as a liaison between our people and yours. It would mean living on or near the reservation, learning our language and customs, and helping to resolve disputes and misunderstandings between Navajo and white communities. The pay would be modest but fair, and there would be a place for both you and Emma." The offer was so unexpected that Marcus struggled to find words. After years of being a servant in another man's house, the idea of having meaningful work that could make a real difference seemed almost too good to be true. "But why?" Marcus asked. "You barely know me," Joseph smiled. "You proved your character in the Spirit Canyon and again last night. You were willing to risk everything for your daughter. To trust in ways of healing that your own people would call superstition. That takes courage and wisdom. More importantly, you understand now that there are powers in this world beyond what most white men acknowledge. That understanding will serve you well in the work ahead." Emma clapped her hands together excitedly. Can we really go live with the nice people who helped make me better, Daddy? Marcus looked at his daughter's bright, hopeful face, then at Joseph's calm, encouraging expression. The choice seemed clear, but he wanted to be certain he understood what he was accepting. You mentioned a debt that I would owe if you saved Emma, Marcus said. Is this how that debt would be repaid? Partly, Joseph acknowledged. But it would also be the beginning of a new relationship between you and my people. We have much to learn from each other, and the world is changing in ways that will require cooperation between our communities. Colonel Harrison had been listening to this exchange with growing irritation. If you're all quite finished arranging your futures, he said sarcastically, I have a household to run. Marcus, I want you gone by sunset. Yes, sir, Marcus replied, then turned back to Joseph. When would you want us to come to the reservation? Tomorrow, if you're willing. There's no point in delaying the start of your new life. As Joseph packed the last of his ceremonial items, he paused beside Emma's bed. Young one, he said gently, you have a gift for seeing beyond the ordinary world. This gift was what attracted the hungry ghost, but it can also be a source of great strength. If you come to live with us, there are elders who can teach you to use this ability safely. Emma nodded solemnly. Will you teach me the songs that drove away the scary things? I will teach you those and many others, Joseph promised. Songs of healing, songs of protection, and songs of celebration for the beauty of the world around us. After Joseph left to make preparations for their departure, Marcus spent the day packing their few belongings and saying goodbye to the other servants who had been his friends and colleagues for 5 years. Some were puzzled by his decision to leave with the Indian medicine man, but others understood that he was following his heart and his gratitude. Mrs. Henderson was particularly emotional about their departure. That child has been like my own granddaughter, she said, tears in her eyes as she hugged Emma goodbye. You take good care of her out there in that wilderness. I will, Marcus promised. And she'll take good care of herself. She's stronger now than she's ever been. As the sun set over Santa Fe, Marcus and Emma loaded their belongings onto the horse that Joseph had provided for them. The medicine man was waiting at the edge of town, mounted on his own horse and leading a pack animal loaded with supplies. Are you ready for your new adventure? Joseph asked Emma as they rode out into the desert evening. Yes, Emma replied enthusiastically. Will I really get to learn magic songs? Not magic, Joseph corrected gently. Sacred songs. Songs that connect us to the natural world and to the spirits of our ancestors. There's an important difference. As they rode toward the reservation under a sky filled with brilliant stars, Marcus felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. For the first time in his adult life, he was moving toward something meaningful rather than simply trying to survive from day to day. Emma was healthy and happy, chattering excitedly about all the things she wanted to learn in her new home. Behind them, Santa Fe grew smaller in the distance until it was just a cluster of lights on the horizon. Ahead lay the Navajo homeland, where Marcus would begin his new role as a bridge between two worlds. The journey that had begun with a desperate father's plea had transformed into something far greater, a chance for understanding, healing, and hope between peoples who had too often seen each other as enemies. As they crested a hill and caught sight of the distant cooking fires of the Navajo settlement, Joseph began to sing softly in his native language. Emma listened intently, already beginning to hum along with the melody. Marcus smiled, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as a family, supported by the wisdom and friendship of people who understood that true healing comes not just from medicine, but from the connections between all living things. The trail to Ghost Canyon was marked with white stones that glowed eerily in the moonlight, creating a ghostly path through the desert scrub. Marcus's horse grew increasingly nervous as they climbed higher into the mesas, snorting and shying at shadows that seemed to move without wind to disturb them. The silence was profound, broken only by the sound of hooves on stone and the distant call of a night bird. After an hour of steady climbing, Marcus reached the entrance to Ghost Canyon. The opening in the red rock wall was narrow, barely wide enough for a horse and rider. Ancient petroglyphs covered the stone surfaces, depicting figures that seemed to dance in the flickering moonlight. Marcus dismounted and led his horse through the passage, feeling the temperature drop noticeably as they entered the canyon. The canyon opened into a circular chamber about 50 yards across. In the center stood a ring of 7 tall stones, each taller than a man and worn smooth by countless years of wind and weather. Around the edges of the canyon, Dark caves yawned like open mouths, their depths lost in shadow. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming, as if unseen eyes observed his every movement. Marcus tied his horse to a stunted juniper tree near the canyon entrance and walked slowly toward the stone circle. With each step, the air seemed to grow thicker, charged with an energy that made his skin tingle. He reached the circle just as clouds began to gather across the moon, plunging the canyon into deeper darkness. Sitting cross-legged in the center of the circle, Marcus tried to steady his breathing and calm his racing heart. He thought of Emma, picturing her face as it had been before the sickness took hold, bright and curious, full of life and laughter. That image would be his anchor through whatever trials lay ahead. The first hour passed quietly. Marcus began to relax slightly, thinking perhaps the test would not be as terrible as Joseph had suggested. But as the night deepened, strange sounds began to emerge from the caves around the canyon walls. At first they were subtle, the scrape of something moving across stone, a whisper that might have been wind through rock crevices. Then he heard his name being called. "Marcus," came a voice from the darkness, soft and pleading. "Marcus, help me." He recognized the voice immediately. It was Emma, but how could that be possible? She was hundreds of miles away, lying in her sickbed in Santa Fe. Yet the voice was unmistakably hers, carrying the same sweet tone she used when she wanted his attention. "Daddy, why did you leave me?" The voice continued, now seeming to come from multiple directions at once. "I'm scared, Daddy. I'm so scared and I can't find you." Marcus's heart ached with the desire to respond, to call out to his daughter and comfort her. But Joseph's words echoed in his memory. "Do not speak to anything that is not clearly human." He clenched his fists and remained silent, though tears began to stream down his face. The voice of Emma grew more desperate, more frightened. "Daddy, there are things in my room. Dark things with glowing eyes. They're coming closer and I can't move. Please come back. Please don't leave me alone with them." Marcus pressed his hands over his ears, but the voice seemed to come from inside his head now, impossible to block out. The Emma voice began to scream, high and terrified, the sound echoing off the canyon walls until it seemed like 100 children were crying out in terror. Then, suddenly, silence. Marcus lowered his hands, breathing heavily. The canyon was quiet again, but the silence felt different now, expectant, as if something was preparing to reveal itself. A mist began to rise from the canyon floor, swirling around the stone circle like smoke from an unseen fire. In the mist, shapes began to form. Marcus saw his wife, Sarah, standing just outside the circle. She looked exactly as she had on their wedding day, beautiful and radiant in a white dress that seemed to glow with its own light. But her eyes were sad, filled with an accusation that cut him to the bone. "You let me die," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the still air. "You promised to protect me, but you let me die in childbirth. And now you're going to let our daughter die too. You're a failure as a husband and as a father." More figures emerged from the mist. Colonel Harrison appeared, his face twisted with rage. "Thief!" he shouted. "You stole my horse and abandoned your duties. You're nothing but a worthless servant who doesn't know his place. I'll see you hanged for what you've done." Behind the colonel came the faces of every person Marcus had ever disappointed or failed. His own father, who had died thinking his son would never amount to anything. The other servants at the mansion who had depended on him and been let down. Even strangers whose paths had crossed his at moments when he could have helped but chose not to. They formed a circle around the stone ring, pointing accusatory fingers and hurling insults and blame. Their voices rose in a cacophony of condemnation that seemed to press against Marcus from all sides. He wanted to defend himself, to explain his choices and actions, but he remembered Joseph's warning and kept his mouth shut. The accusatory voices gradually faded, replaced by something far worse, the sound of Emma crying. But this wasn't the desperate pleading from before. This was the quiet, broken sobbing of a child who had given up hope, who knew she was dying and didn't understand why her father had abandoned her. In the mist directly in front of him, Marcus saw Emma as she was now, pale, thin, her golden hair matted with sweat. Her eyes closed as tears leaked from beneath her lids. She looked so real that he could almost reach out and touch her. "I know you can't come back," she whispered. "I know you tried to find help, but it's too late now. The dark things have almost won. I can feel myself slipping away, Daddy. I just wanted to say goodbye." The image of Emma began to fade, becoming translucent like morning mist. Marcus felt his heart breaking as he watched his daughter apparently dying before his eyes. Every instinct screamed at him to leap up, to run to her, to do something, anything, to save her. But he forced himself to remain seated in the circle, knowing that this was part of the test. As Emma's image disappeared completely, a new sound filled the canyon, the howling of wind, though the air remained perfectly still where Marcus sat. The howling grew louder and more intense, joined by other sounds. The roar of fire, the crash of thunder, the screaming of voices he couldn't identify. The very air seemed to vibrate with malevolent energy. Dark shapes began to emerge from the caves around the canyon walls. They moved like shadows given substance, shifting and changing form as they advanced toward the stone circle. Some resembled animals, wolves with glowing red eyes, bears that walked upright on their hind legs, serpents as thick as tree trunks. Others were more humanoid but wrong in fundamental ways, too tall or too thin, with too many arms or faces where faces shouldn't be. The creatures circled the stone ring like predators stalking prey, but they couldn't seem to cross the invisible barrier that the ancient stones created. They snarled and hissed in frustration, their eyes fixed on Marcus with hungry malevolence. One of the creatures spoke, its voice like the grinding of stone against stone. "We know what you want, little man. We know about your sick child. Release yourself from this circle, and we will tell you how to save her. We have powers that even the Navajo medicine man cannot match." Another creature, this one resembling a massive spider with a human head, chittered in agreement. Yes, we can cure any illness, heal any wound, but only if you come to us willingly. Step outside the circle, and your daughter will be whole again by sunrise." Marcus felt the terrible temptation of their offer. What if they were telling the truth? What if leaving the circle was the key to saving Emma? But then he remembered Joseph's warning about not trusting anything that wasn't clearly human, and he realized that this, too, was part of the test. The hours crept by with agonizing slowness. The creatures continued their assault on his resolve, offering bargains and making threats in equal measure. The mist swirled higher, sometimes obscuring his vision completely, sometimes clearing to reveal new horrors lurking at the edge of the stone circle. But Marcus held firm, focusing on his love for Emma and his determination to see her healthy again. He clutched Maria Begay's pouch of corn pollen in his hand, drawing strength from its presence. As the first pale light of dawn began to touch the eastern rim of the canyon, the creatures and their voices gradually faded away, leaving Marcus alone in the circle with the rising sun.